They are islands of history, islands of power and of passion, small islands that once ruled the world, grand islands where dozens of peoples and customs reside in sometimes uneasy alliances, birthplaces of some of history's most enlightened arts and literature, home of many of the past's darkest legends. Now, we explore myth and reality in the Wondrous Kingdom, Ireland and the British Isles. There are many wondrous things under the sun, some vast and bold for all to see, others smaller, hidden, lesser known. What marvels have you seen in this world of endless fascination? What remains for you to discover? Your answers are here in Amazing Wonders of the World. Great Britain, England and Scotland. 244,000 square miles of lush fields, craggy, foggy highlands, cities and towns rich with history. To the west, Ireland, dramatic and troubled, home of a proud people. Dublin, London, Edinburgh, ancient and thriving cities. From them arose some of the world's greatest writers and historians. Yet, like many of the wonders of Great Britain and Ireland, man's origins here are cloaked in mystery. And one of the most amazing mysteries is situated on the Salisbury Plain in the southern English Midlands. 5,000 years ago, the plain looked much as it does today. This was just being built. A circle of standing stones, megaliths, enclosed by a circular embankment formed as many as 800 years before the stones were laid. 30 giant stones in a mysterious circle, one of Earth's ancient enigmas, a wonder of the ages, a wonder for all time. This is the enduring puzzle the world knows as Stonehenge. Today, Stonehenge stands between two busy highways on the rolling plain. It's an incongruous apparition whose true creators and purpose may forever be unknown. Clearly, once a sacred place to those creators, it exercises a powerful attraction over modern men and women. It would be impressive enough, perhaps, if Stonehenge's builders had simply propped up these awesome 50-ton stones where they found them and arranged them in a quaint circle. But they didn't. Archaeologists say they laboriously cut them out of quarries as far away as 200 miles or more. These Bronze Age people, to whom life was certainly already trying enough, then dragged the stones one by one every inch of the way here. Stonehenge's builders had never heard of the wheel. Who undertook such a monumental task? Even more baffling, why? Stonehenge has a history of provoking speculation and unorthodox theories. The people most commonly associated with it are the Druids. The Druids left no scientific evidence of their existence, but there's plenty of life in their legend. Some believe the Druids were a race of wizards and soothsayers with magical abilities. They are often credited with building Stonehenge as an astronomical observatory, or perhaps for performing religious ceremonies. The Druids were certainly the most learned class among the ancient Celtic tribes. Their name means knowing the oak tree. Legends suggest they frequented oak forests and acted as priests, judges, and teachers. The Druids left no written record of their own, but ancient writings from other cultures speak of the Druids' conviction that the soul was immortal and passed at death from one person to another. In fact, scholars now believe that Druids in the West and Hindu Brahmins in the East share common roots in an ancient priesthood. Today's tumbled pile of rocks is a far cry from the near-perfect symmetry of Stonehenge as it stood when completed. The outer circle, known as the Sarsen Circle, was a full 97 feet across. 30 upright stones, called sarsens, were topped by 30 lintels or capstones. 5 huge structures making up the central horseshoe are called trilithons. This trilithic arch was over 25 feet tall and open to the east, perfect for viewing sunrise at the summer solstice. Whether the Druids built Stonehenge, or, as some have suggested, it was the work of some ancient nomadic Greeks or long-lost people of Atlantis, they took their time. The outer bank and ditch were dug first, 5,000 years ago, before Egypt's Great Pyramids, before written history at all. Then, 1,000 years later, an inner circle of stones called blue stones was erected. At 4 tons each, they're the small stones. Most scientists are convinced that they were dragged from the Preseli Mountains of South Wales, a full 250 miles away. 500 years after that, the sarsens, the huge stones that make Stonehenge instantly recognizable, arrived from Marlborough Downs, 20 miles distant. They were erected in a circle and topped with the equally huge lintels. To this day, no one knows how. The horseshoe shapes formed by the inner stones seem carefully aligned along the sun's axis on rising at midsummer and setting at midwinter. From this has grown speculation that the structure was an astronomical observatory. Yet there's no further evidence that it's anything more than a coincidence. One fact has held for centuries. No one really knows what Stonehenge was for. Today, millions know about Stonehenge. They've seen the pictures and postcards. Sometimes it seems they've all shown up at once, along with occasional crowds of New Age mystics. In fact, Stonehenge attracts nearly 1 million people each year to this otherwise sleepy stretch of Salisbury Plain. Viewing the ancient creation in 3 dimensions provides a powerful spark for the imagination.
It seems like a giant chess piece. People's answer to the questions of time and space and God, or something like that.
Over the centuries, the timeless stones have suffered significant erosion at the hands of generations of tourists and passers-by. On a visit here a century ago, the writer Mark Twain complained he saw a man pull a hammer from his coat and actually chip off a fragment of one of the sarsens to keep as a souvenir. Nowadays, a surrounding barrier protects Stonehenge to allow it to stand to impress and mystify generations to come. Only a few miles away on Salisbury Plain, however, are other strange stones, equally mysterious, but far more accessible. These are the stone rings of Avebury. The stones aren't as large as those at Stonehenge, but the circle they lie in is. And many of the visitors who find these are convinced that Avebury radiates a mystical power. This prehistoric complex of ceremonial sites actually surrounds Avebury, a town that is situated in the southern region of England. The Neolithic people who gathered here to perform their unknown rites seem more real when visitors view their strange creations. These circles are younger than those at Stonehenge. They've been here only 4,500 years. The original stones weigh a mere 20 tons. The outer of two concentric circles is a full 380 feet, one of the largest in all of Britain's prehistoric sites. Armies set loose by a powerful medieval church toppled many of these stones and buried others, fearful of whatever power they might have. A power that is still evident to many who come to visit the stone circles of Avebury. Watch what this man is holding. He's dowsing. The bent piece of metal is moving, following what he calls the Earth's ley lines. Energy fields that are said to connect Avebury, Stonehenge, and dozens of other ancient places throughout the world. The metal is moving, but his hand isn't, showing that the ancients may have known something moderns are just beginning to learn.
Standing here with a couple of bent coat hangers in my hand. I don't know, it's just incredible. I would never have believed it without trying it myself.
People here believe the energy fields created or focused by the stones have the power to heal or improve one's physical health and mental abilities. They're convinced the creators of these circles were using knowledge long since lost to time. It could be a mysterious energy. It could be simple awe. There's little question about what attracts so many to these amazing wonders of the ancient world. Perhaps the greatest attraction is the questions themselves.
But there is a legend that should they ever leave, the White Tower will crumble and the monarchy will fall.
200 miles east in central London on the River Thames is a castle fortress far younger than the circles of Stonehenge and Avebury, yet ancient by most standards. It's a work of stone that, like the mysterious circles, once evoked formidable power and quaking fear. A castle whose builders are well known, and about which much has been written. Home to kings and queens, Armageddon to criminals. This is the Tower of London. The Druids of Stonehenge had been gone for centuries when the Tower of London was born in the 11th century. For 900 years, English royalty lived here. The arms and armor of kings and queens were fashioned and stored here. And since the time of William the Conqueror and the Norman Conquest, feathered guardians have stood watch over this palace. The Tower Ravens. The Raven Master cares for the ravens on the greens of the Tower grounds and presides over this curious slice of history. In 1661, King Charles II protected the ravens by royal decree and even proclaimed the birds controlled the power of the crown. He believed a legend that suggested the day the birds desert the tower, London will fall to its enemies. No one knows how the legend began, but the ravens have always been here. And the Raven Master is well paid to feed and protect the protectors.
Oh no, they don't fly away, they know which side their bread is buttered on.
And to be sure the birds don't leave, their wings are clipped. What treasures do the watchful ravens protect? The White Tower, the earliest stone structure of the Tower complex, built by William the Conqueror soon after 1066 to intimidate the Anglo-Saxons he had defeated. At 90 feet, it stood for centuries as London's tallest building. On display inside are ancient shields, pikes, and lances, a young England's weapons of war. The Bloody Tower, where princes and nobles were hidden and slaughtered in court intrigues. Where Lady Jane Grey, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Thomas More suffered long and bitter imprisonments. Traitor's Gate, the gloomy entrance through which the condemned arrived for their public executions. St. Thomas's Tower, whose construction began in the year 1280. It became the private home of King Edward I. It was Britain's earliest royal palace, perched above Traitor's Gate. Today, guides dress in period costumes. Light filters into these halls of history through stained glass on meticulous reproductions of original furnishings, including Edward's throne and medieval chambers. This is the only surviving medieval palace in Britain. Finally, visitors to the Tower of London consider the gruesome chopping block where Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII, lost her head in 1536. The Tower of London, awesome centerpiece of the most illustrious and darkest chapters of English history. A modern magnet for more than 2 million people a year who come to wonder at what has been. If walls could talk. Connected to the tower is a legendary bridge. To many, the Tower Bridge looks like a castle. In fact, it was patterned after Balmoral Castle in Scotland. But this is a structure that's been working for a living ever since it was built, more than a century ago. It's a vital thoroughfare connecting London across the Thames. The Tower Bridge was a favorite project of Queen Victoria herself just over a century ago. Ironically, it was almost never built. Boatmen who made their living ferrying Londoners across the river opposed the bridge and delayed construction for years. Finally, after 50 proposals, London's city architect, working with the brightest engineers of the day, perfected a design that would accommodate road and foot traffic and the tall ships passing underneath, and complement the nearby Tower of London. It satisfied Queen Victoria and generations of Londoners.
It's our bridge. It's a unique monument. It's historical and it's also beautiful. I don't think you could ask for anything more than that.
Inside the towers, displays show construction of the Tower Bridge and its glorious opening day in 1894. Incredible as they are, the Tower of London and the Tower Bridge are but 2 stops on a path through history and grandeur found nowhere else on earth. London is home to many places where events became history and history became legend. Westminster Abbey, one of the most visited churches in the Christian world. A vast Gothic masterpiece that took centuries to build. Today, Westminster Abbey is still the venue for the Crown's greatest pageants. Within its walls is the nation's largest collection of tombs and monuments to the famous. The remains of Elizabeth I, Mary Queen of Scots, St. Edward the Confessor, even Charles Dickens lie here. Outside the Abbey are two of the Western world's most recognizable structures. The massive clock tower housing the bell called Big Ben, and Britain's magnificent House of Parliament, where power was taken from kings and queens and placed in the hands of the people. St. Paul's Cathedral, designed by Christopher Wren himself, built more than 3 centuries ago, a miraculous survivor of bomb after bomb during World War II. It's topped by the second largest cathedral dome in the world. And the true palaces of royalty. Buckingham Palace, current home of Queen Elizabeth II, with room after room containing some of the finest art, porcelain, and paintings in the world. And Hampton Court, where costume guides lead the awestruck through the bedrooms of William and Mary, where rich tapestries spun with silver and gold cover the walls. Its most famous resident was King Henry VIII, who in the early 16th century defied the Pope and the Catholic Church itself and created a new England. He and his court came here to live in 1529. His Majesty added some of the most spectacular rooms, the chapel and the great room where hundreds dined every day. In time, his court came to number 1,000 people. And like the seekers of ancient marvels who honeycomb London on their travels, visitors to Hampton Court get lost in a whimsical wonder, a maze set among 60 acres of gardens. It's one of Britain's remaining 88 mazes. Once, they were places meant to amuse the royals and give them an entertaining way to exercise their minds and bodies. The maze at Hampton Court still baffles visitors 300 years after it was created. And people still marvel at the maze of Hever Castle, a romantic double-moated castle in Kent, about 45 miles southeast of the city of London. The castle has a varied history, stretching back over 7 centuries. The gatehouse and outer walls marked the beginning of construction in the 13th century. In 1507, Hever Castle became the childhood home of Anne Boleyn. Henry VIII courted her here, and she became his queen in 1533. But she failed to produce a male heir, and it cost her her life when Henry ordered her imprisonment and execution at the Tower of London 3 years later. Ironically, Anne Boleyn was mother to Elizabeth I, who, when she took the crown in 1558, became one of the greatest monarchs England has ever known. After Anne Boleyn's death, the king gave the castle to his 4th wife, Anne of Cleves. Today, its caretakers exhibit memorabilia of all of Henry's wives. Hever Castle dazzles visitors with its broad and elaborate gardens and grounds, a contribution of the American William Waldorf Astor, a wealthy fan of British history who bought the castle a century ago. And the crown jewel of this glittering layout is the maze. From above, the marvelous maze looks simple enough, but inside the tunnels of yew trees is a confusing complex of wrong turns and dead ends.
You lost?
Yeah.
Those who follow literally in the footsteps of the unfortunate Anne Boleyn often take nearly half an hour to reach the center of the maze. And that center is less than 20 feet from the door from which they started. Are the walkers confused? Yes. Alone? No.
I got lost and my daughter left me there scared, laughing at me.
Did you get lost?
No, it was easy to find the middle.
Getting out.
It was really hard getting out.
It is indeed. Each maze has a key. Walkers have to remember that if they turn left going in, they must turn right going out. Another story that will exercise the imagination originates in the seaside town of Brighton. The British aristocracy put this formerly small village on the map in the middle of the 18th century, choosing it for what they called the seawater cure for their aches and pains. When the Prince of Wales made Brighton his home away from home, it became Europe's premier high society hotspot. Since then, it has kept its international reputation and remained Britain's own favorite resort. But among Brighton's seafront squares and lush parks, astonished visitors find the gleaming centerpiece of Brighton's magic, one truly amazing creation, the spectacular Royal Pavilion. The Royal Pavilion's Indian-style minarets and spires creates a uniquely romantic picture. Inside, visitors enter a fabulous world of luxury and extravagance. This is truly one of the most exotic buildings in all the world. The interior is Chinese in style and magnificent in effect. Its beauty is said to have moved the Prince of Wales to tears.
He wanted a fantasy palace, and this is what his architects designed for him.
The young prince named George ordered construction to begin in 1787. Construction of the pavilion was completed 35 years later. By that time, the prince had become King George IV.
If you were a guest of George IV, you would arrive, you would go into the Chinese corridor where you'd wait to be greeted by him.
Dinners were a formal affair, a menu of more than 100 dishes. An army of chefs would create these meals in one of the most modern kitchens of its day. By the way, that dragon holding a chandelier is 10 feet long. Concerts would follow in the music room. This is where the Prince of Wales wept with pleasure when he first set eyes on it. This ornate fireplace is a replica. The original was removed a century later by Queen Victoria, who hated Brighton, but liked the pavilion so much she took a great deal of its contents with her when she left. 170 wagon loads, to be exact.
The carpets, the wallpapers, the light fittings.
Eventually, the Queen sold the magnificent structure she left behind. Its buyer? The city of Brighton itself. The year was 1850. Nearly 100 years later, a restoration project was begun, and it continues even today. Another of Great Britain's treasures has more mystery than opulence. Warwick Castle recalls a noble age of knights in armor and heroic battles. It's set among the rolling fields of England's southern Midlands, not far from Stonehenge and Avebury. It richly deserves its fame as the world's finest example of medieval architecture. More people visit it each year than any other castle in the world. In the 18th century, Warwick Castle underwent a profound transformation from a military stronghold to a grand residence. But Warwick, of all England's castles, has not escaped the past without collecting more than its share of dark mysteries and frightening stories of ghosts and hauntings. In fact, people here say a remarkable collection of unhappy spirits has taken up residence during the 9 centuries since William the Conqueror established his fortress here. The caretakers say ghosts and poltergeists roam the cavernous halls, gaze forlornly out from these ramparts, trudge loudly up and down the stairs, and rattle the doorknobs. Indeed, curious visitors to Warwick Castle discover a story that's a cut above the average haunted tale. While they marvel at the medieval furnishings and grand settings, they may overhear the castle's curator telling the story of Falk Greville, a wealthy nobleman who bought the castle and came to live here at the dawn of the 17th century. It's the story of a demented servant who felt the Lord had slighted him in his will. So he ambushed Falk Greville one night in his bedroom, stabbing him with a dagger. The servant barricaded himself in his quarters, then killed himself. Greville clung to life for a month. Today, the castle's caretakers swear that Greville's angry ghost still appears in the bedroom where he was ambushed. But the ghost that haunts this magnificent castle is only a strange footnote to the great tapestry of history chronicled in these great wonders of England. Wonders that have survived the turmoil of centuries and will stand for centuries more. And now, as Amazing Wonders of the World continues, it's on to England's neighbors, Scotland in the cold, mountainous north, and Ireland, the Emerald Isle, across the water to the west. 2 lands whose histories are tied closely to England's past, yet which hold some of the most amazing stories in these storied isles. It is a dramatic study in contrasts to London, its counterpart hundreds of miles to the south.
The music of the pipes is supernatural.
This is Edinburgh, Scotland, at the height of festival season. No fewer than 10 annual late summer festivals produce a startling annual display of energy, art, and celebration in an ancient city, better known for its trying climate, brooding prospects, and bloody history. Edinburgh occupies a strategic, craggy location on the southern shores of the Firth of Forth in southeastern Scotland. The city is home to 500,000 Scots. Edinburgh is literally a 2-sided city. The old town, set on the slope of Castle Rock, dates from the 11th century. It's home to Holyrood Palace, the Scottish residence of the English royal family. The new town to the north is new only in the Scottish view of time. Its growth began in the 1700s. And, as if to prove not all of history's celebrities seek out comfortable, balmy surroundings, Edinburgh boasts more than its share of famous former residents. Among them, the poet Robert Burns, Sir Walter Scott, Charles Darwin, Alexander Graham Bell, and Robert Louis Stevenson. Dominating the city's skyline is Edinburgh Castle, a massive stonework of history sitting on the vertical remnants of an extinct volcano. Since the 11th century, it has been a focal point of battles between the Scots and the English, burned, ruined, and rebuilt again and again. Decade after decade in the 1600s, English invaders captured and scarred this seemingly impregnable castle. The final violent battle for Edinburgh Castle was just 250 years ago. It's a history that may help explain the Scottish fascination with some of the odd and twisted characters of its past. 10 o'clock at night, time for an evening stroll. And here's your guide.
Good evening, and welcome to what's called the Witchery, Murder and Mystery
Edinburgh's
Tour.
history is full of grandeur and royalty, to be sure. But Edinburgh also has a dark side.
With murder, witchcraft, hangings, executions, and some of the...
During the Middle Ages, witches were put to the fire here by the thousands. Turbulent and superstitious centuries created a long list of restless spirits the locals claim still haunt these streets. On the city's most popular walking tour, a few of the top attractions have a disconcerting way of coming alive. For example, the Mad Monk of the Cowgate, an entertainer's impression of a friar who murdered unsuspecting passers-by in these alleys centuries ago. Then, the ghost of Agnes Finney, burned at the stake as a witch centuries ago.
Wandering around this part of...
The spirit of Angus, a bloodthirsty fisherman shuffles by, dragging his club foot behind him. The actors playing these Scottish ghouls for the benefit of their nightly guests take their roles very seriously. Some who come to witness their unusual performance in the dim, damp evenings might fight off the shivers of fear and call it a crude exercise in superstition. But after all, this is Scotland, a land where truth and legend have often proven difficult to tell apart. It's the land of Loch Ness and the world's most fabled monster of the deep. It's a lake of murky, bitter, cold water in the Scottish Highlands, 200 miles north of Edinburgh. Loch Ness is 23 miles long and only about 1 mile across at its widest point. English and Scots have battled for centuries over these lands and formidable lakes. The remnants of Urquhart Castle at one end of Loch Ness brood over the lake as if in tribute to the bloodshed. Urquhart Castle's history may stretch back to the 6th century, at a time when Saint Columba arrived from what is now Ireland to deliver Christianity to the pagan Pict tribes who inhabited these stony hills. And that is when the story began that has since brought wonder to people the world over. It is the story of a sighting by someone in St. Columba's party, perhaps Columba himself, of an amazing creature rising from the depths of this lake to show itself to the visitors. In the centuries that followed, Columba's Aquatilis Bestia became known as the Loch Ness Monster. The enormous creature is said to rise periodically from the depths of the loch to show itself to onlookers or unprepared passers-by. Even in modern times, descriptions of it are remarkably similar. A small head atop a long neck protruding from the water. Fins or perhaps flippers on the rare occasions it's been seen out of the lake. A hump or humps and perhaps a long tail. The Loch Ness legend was revitalized in modern times with a flurry of sightings beginning in the 1930s. There are dozens of sworn eyewitnesses living today. And those who come to Loch Ness today in hopes of seeing the creature find plenty of local encouragement.
It's history. I mean, even though Nessie may not exist, sorry, and now she does in our mind. So
have you seen her?
We're gonna look.
No, we're gonna look. We're going for a closer look now.
If there's a monster alive in Loch Ness, which one is it? It seems impossible it could be the same creature St. Columba gazed upon 1,400 years ago, unless it's immortal. Some say there is more than one monster in Loch Ness. Scientific expeditions have turned up no definitive evidence of a large living creature in the lake's 700-foot depths. Although one marine scientist using sonar discovered a large hidden cavern or series of caves at the lake's deepest part. For those who gaze on its waters in person, the strange draw of Loch Ness is in its power to evoke what could be, its power perhaps to bring legends to life, even after a millennium and a half.
Although people say to me very often, what would happen to your business if they proved without shadow of doubt that there was or there was not a monster? Now my reply to that is that it wouldn't make a ha'porth of difference to us. People would still want to see it for themselves.
And for those visitors who want to touch wonders more real, more concrete than the Loch Ness Monster, they can gaze upon its home from Urquhart Castle, where the great kings of England and Scotland clashed again and again over the centuries. And who might have glimpsed one of history's most amazing legends themselves, if they had only turned their heads. Just a few miles west of Loch Ness are the enchanting remnants of another great historical drama. This is the tiny Isle of Iona. An unlikely and modest place for a momentous occurrence 15 long centuries ago. This is where St. Columba landed from Ireland in the year 563. It was the first way station on his mission to convert the Picts of Scotland to Christianity, a relatively young religion at the time. Columba's landing marked the very first arrival of Christianity in all the British Isles. St. Columba established a small monastery on the rocky shore of Iona, and sometime shortly thereafter, one or more remarkably religious and talented monks arrived to create one of the great masterpieces of Christianity, the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells is a transcription of the four Gospels of the New Testament. The text is rendered to perfection in Latin and illuminated with remarkable, finely detailed illustrations. It is perhaps the oldest surviving book on earth. In the 9th century, the monks of Iona transported the treasure to Ireland for safekeeping when marauding Viking raiders chased them from their monastery. It's been there ever since. Today, the Book of Kells rests well protected in the library of Dublin's Trinity College. It's been here for more than 300 years. It's amazing it survived at all. Robbed from the monks and rediscovered buried in the ground 1,000 years ago, the remarkable manuscript has survived the ravages of time and man relatively unscathed. If the manuscript were merely text, it would be wondrous enough. But the Book of Kells dazzles its viewers long after its creation with its elaborate, stunning illustrations. An artistic masterpiece by modest unknown scribes, 680 pages long. it's considered the finest illuminated manuscript human beings ever produced. Modern bibliophiles can take heart. Today, reproduction copies are available for a mere $20,000. What became of the monks who created the Book of Kells? They, or their descendants, returned from Ireland here to remote Iona. They rebuilt their decaying monastery. It prospered for nearly 1,000 years before the fanatical forces of the English Reformation destroyed it. When the ruins were given to the Church of Scotland in 1899, a modern group of priests joined together to rebuild the abbey once again. Today, a new spiritual community thrives there. And many people come to pay homage to the abbey, to the brave artisans who lived here long ago, and to another remarkable feature of this tiny island, an ancient graveyard where an amazing 48 of Scotland's early kings lie buried, including one immortalized by Shakespeare, Macbeth. But most visitors leave Iona filled with awe, not for old kings and the bones and cracked headstones they left behind, but for the legacy of monks who took up their pens here 1,500 years ago and created the Book of Kells, a written wonder of the world. West, across the Irish Sea, in the nearby island country of Ireland, skeptics have a word of their own to describe false or whimsical notions not found in the Book of Kells, but nevertheless prevalent throughout human affairs. The word is blarney, and it was coined here. This is typical of most Irish villages, colorful, charming, friendly. Only this one's a bit busier than most. Visitors are greeted in Gaelic, words meaning 100,000 welcomes, to the village called Blarney. 250,000 visitors a year arrive to enjoy Irish handiwork like the celebrated hand-knitted Aran sweaters. The locals say proudly, there's nothing warmer than Blarney wool. But the wonder of this village lies atop a steep hill, atop a 500-year-old castle built there to protect the town, Blarney Castle. It's an exhausting climb, a long, winding stone stairway. The goal? To reach the top, of course, more than 70 feet up. And then to line up, await one's turn, then to grasp two iron bars and lean dangerously backward to kiss the famous Blarney Stone.
Wasn't this in the Olympics? Oh, Dave, Christmas! I've got 8 or 10 things I want to say. That's awesome.
Then, and only then, will these visitors win a celebrated Irish treasure, the gift of gab.
A bit frightening as you lean backwards, but I'm already feeling very lucky, and I'm sure that wonderful things are going to happen to me.
You have the gift of gab. Can you kind of let it go now?
I think I already have the gift of gab. I'm a lawyer, so.
Pilgrims to Blarney have been kissing the Blarney Stone for some 200 years. Yes, it is clean from time to time. But after climbing up 108 steps, why must they bend over backward to kiss the stone? The Irish explain it this way. If things come too easily in life, like the gift of gab, they're not really worth having.
I kissed it.
There are a number of versions of the original legend of the Blarney Stone, as one might expect in a land where gab is highly valued. Some say a witch was saved from drowning in the Blarney River 400 years ago. She gave the stone magical powers. Kiss it and become a master of the arts of eloquence and persuasion. Yet, while some who came here swear with amazement that they truly found a new talent in this aging fortress, others are awestruck at how a quaint legend keeps delivering throngs of talkative people to their doors.
Yes, lovely.
These are people who are unlikely to take offense at a French consul's famous interpretation of the magical power of the Blarney Stone. Kissing the stone, he said, creates the privilege of telling lies for 7 years. And now we leave the wondrous kingdom, soon to search for other places, other things that amaze and inspire all who come near them. There are many wondrous things under the sun. Some vast and bold for all to see, others smaller, hidden, lesser known. What marvels have you seen in this world of endless fascination? What remains for you to discover? Your answers are here. Join us again for more encounters with amazing wonders of the world.